Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I am Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold, coming at you solo today from a hotel room in Irvine, California. The Element in Irvine, California. Fun fact, when you book a stay for 26 days at the same hotel, they actually give you a care package when you walk in, at least at this hotel. So, over the course of, and for anyone watching on YouTube, over the course of my time here in Irvine, I'm hopeful to find somewhere with a better backdrop so you're not staring at the closed window of my hotel room this whole time. But for now, I just want to get a quick episode at you. It's not going to be particularly long, but we are going to have a good bit of insight from Mickey Loomis, Dennis Allen. Both guys talk today, and we're going to dive in there. But first things first, we got a look at the facilities the Saints will be practicing in. One big field, basically a lot of open space. It's very nice, not a ton of shade, but you probably won't need it because the temperatures are going to be in the 80s all week, not much humidity to speak of at all. So one thing that's going to be interesting to come from that is how much more pressure is put on the Saints players in terms of, okay, you're not getting breaks, you're not getting shortened sessions, you're not getting anything given to you because of the heat like you might have in Metairie. So they're going to get pushed a little harder than they might have previously. So we'll see. I'm not going to complain about it for a second because it's gorgeous. You walk out of the airport and 10 seconds in, you understand why they wanted to come here in terms of, okay, we got to get out of town. Where are we going to go? Okay, we're going to go to Southern California. One thing that I know has annoyed people, and we talked about it previously on this podcast, why aren't the Saints allowing fans into the practices, right? They did it when they were at the Greenbrier. They've done it last year. The Rams have done it at the same facility. I've talked about it previously, and to me, it always kind of read as, hey, the logistics of this for the return is not going to be there, and they wanted to spend more investment back home. They're going to have 2 open practices. There was some confusion over the last week or so. There's been a lot of reporting about the Raiders are also here in Southern California, and they're not allowed to have open practices because of these arcane NFL rules. And there was some idea that, okay, maybe the NFL stepped in to stop the Saints from doing that. And it really doesn't sound like that was the case. And here's Mickey Loomis explaining that.
I don't think so. Look, I think for us here, we're away from our home market. We're not expecting, we weren't expecting a lot of fans. The venue, all the logistics that are involved, because it's significantly more logistics involved when you open it up to the public as to when you don't. So all those factors came into play. I didn't really, do much inquiry about what we were allowed to do with fans or not allowed to do, because pretty quickly we determined that, hey, it's going to be a limited amount of people at practice.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, that's always what it seemed like to me, and that's what it is. I tweeted that information, and someone said, oh, Mickey's full of shit. And I'm like, okay, well, to me, if you were full of shit, you'd have come out and been like, yeah, the NFL said no. Covered your own ass. I think he's just being honest there. And, it makes sense. Like, there's a lot that would have to go into that. And I understand there's Saints fans in Southern California who would have wanted to go. That number's not going to be particularly high, right? Like, when you consider just the logistics and the investment that it would take to get all of that done for the number that would show up and is not guaranteed, I understand it. They're more concerned about getting a 90-man roster to Irvine, California, making sure everyone's taken care of, making sure everything's done right. Hey, and then putting a competitive team on the field, and then putting the best team possible on the field. That's what they're concerned about. So I'm not going to complain that they are not courting fans in Southern California. Sorry for anyone who doesn't want to hear that. One person they are courting in Southern California, and this is a question we were going to have going into camp, Alvin Kamara is here. He did show up. He did report. He went through his conditioning test. That was basically what was going on today. As far as I know, no one failed their conditioning tests. There will be 3 players not on the field, and that does not include Ryan Ramczyk, who is already out for the season. Right. We'll talk a little bit more about Ryan Ramczyk in the second segment because both Mickey and Dennis talked a good bit about him. But Alvin is here. Alvin seeking a new contract, did report to camp. That always seemed like the likeliest scenario to me. And the reason being, the new CBA has made it prohibitive for players to not show up. The fines you would incur and the mandatory fines you would incur. Previously, the teams had the option to levy those fines or not levy those fines. So players could hold out and teams could say, hey, we're going to play ball. We're not going to fine you, blah, blah, blah. That's not the case anymore. These fines have to happen. And so you would get fined $50K for every day that you are not at practice. So it becomes way more costly for players to hold out than for the teams to deal with a player holding out. And if you're a player who is a running back who's already getting underpaid relative to the rest of the star players around the league, right? Relative to the wide receiver position, relative to the quarterback position, relative to the cornerback position, relative to the pass rush, relative to offensive line. Like, running backs already get the raw end of the money deal. So it would make zero sense to start forking over $50K a day just to prove your point. And I think when you look back and you see how Alvin handled this whole holdout situation, that was always in mind, right? Like, you look at it and you say, okay, why would you do this at minicamp where it's not as impactful? Well, if you did get a fine, it would be 18 grand. And the reason you would hold out at camp would be to create an awkward situation and to make sure that everyone knew where you were in terms of what you're seeking. Alvin already did that. And I think it was a smart move by him to do it at minicamp, where these $50,000 fines are not mandatory. So we'll see. He did show up. We'll get into more of that in a minute, but here's what DA had to say about Alvin showing up at camp.
DA, what's your expectation with Alvin tomorrow? You expect him on the field?
I expect Alvin to be out. He was out here today. He ran the conditioning test. Every indication that we've gotten is that he's going to be out here practicing tomorrow, and so that's what we expect. We're looking forward to working with him. I think having him out here and having him practice and having him work, I think that's beneficial for all of us. I mean, obviously with a new system and new offense, I think that's important. And yet, I think we all understand there's a business aspect to the game of football, and so. But every indication that we've gotten is that he'll be out here practicing tomorrow.
By his standards, not the best last two seasons for him by his standards of his career. This new offense you're putting in, you think it plays to his skill set even better than?
Well, look, obviously he was there for the first couple of days of minicamp, and there was a few plays in there where you really saw how this offense, this scheme can benefit him and in turn benefit us. And so I'm excited to see what that looks like.
How does he look? You said he ran the conditioning.
He ran great. He ran awesome. I mean, there was zero concern about what he was going to look like coming in here. He's come into shape. Every time he's come into camp, he comes in tremendous shape. And so, he looked great.
Did you guys talk before this at all?
Just briefly, but nothing, nothing major.
Some clear relief there. And here's another clip from Mickey Loomis, who, he won't go so far as to say he didn't expect Alvin to show up, but he will go so far as to say he didn't have any expectations, which means if you're not expecting a guy to show up, then you are at least entertaining the idea that he isn't. Here's what Mickey had to say.
How would you describe where things are with Alvin right now?
Yeah, look, he's here. It's I haven't had a conversation with him today, but he's here. I appreciate that he's here. And look, I think one thing that you have to understand, or we have to understand, is that I'm going to be conservative here. I'd say 50% of our organization, players, coaches, administrators, scouts, feel like they're underpaid, right? And believe they deserve and want more money. And how each of us respond to that and act accordingly. Listen, that's a personal issue, and so I appreciate that he's here. I think those are questions that you have to ask him how he's feeling, but I appreciate that he's here and he's in great shape like he always is, and looking for a good season. But more importantly, I think for him is he wants to win. just like the rest of us.
You had some doubts that he might not be here?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd put any expectation on it. I just we'll see what happens.
Is it fair to say his situation is a little more nuanced than more money? Isn't it more
I don't know. You have to ask him those questions about nuance.
Yeah, Mickey, he essentially had 1 year left on his deal. I know next year some things kick in, but were you guys content to just play it out? He's the one who was.
Yeah, look, I don't want to get into those kind of conversations, and it's nothing new. It's nothing about him. It's just you guys know how I am about negotiations. I don't like doing that publicly. I don't like, I'm not one that wants to put things out or try to influence any negotiation through the media. I think if I have something to say, I say it directly to the agents and the players.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, Alvin being there is a good sign. There's no denying that. Alvin's always going to be in shape. Alvin does the offseason work like a maniac, right? Like that's never been the concern with Alvin as he comes in out of shape. The question is, you're looking at a guy who's going to be 29 years old by the start of next season. And can you not play ball with Alvin, who we are set to talk with on Wednesday, by the way, the first day of camp, and still get a representative performance out of Alvin? That's the question mark. Because I think you need that. Whether you want to invest the money or not, I think you need that out of Alvin. So we'll find that out. Now, the next question is Alvin going to hold out in camp? We saw CJ Gardner-Johnson do that a couple years ago, and it was effective. It drew attention. So what happens when Alvin says, hey, I'm not doing team drills? Right now, we don't know if that's going to happen. This is what Dennis Allen said when he was asked about it.
Y'all expect him to practice, but does that mean he's going to practice fully? Like, is there any part of practice he won't participate in, knowing that that's going on?
Not from our standpoint, as we sit here right now. I mean, he's fully healthy, and so, yeah, our anticipation is that he'll practice. So I'm not going to get into any hypotheticals after that. You know what I mean?
I guess I meant like sometimes there's situations where players set out team drills for whatever reason. Sometimes some contract issues.
Yeah, look, it's nothing that's been discussed.
We'll see. Again, I don't think DA has a lot of control here. I think DA is just trying to get through a training camp in Irvine, California, in sunny weather, and trying to create a scenario where you get the best version of the Saints in the 2024 season, which is a massive season for Dennis Allen, both in terms of, hey, this team needs to figure something out, and also as a head coach, this could be your final chance to put together a season that says, hey, I belong here. Right? If you crash and burn this year, this is your last shot. You're not getting a third chance. So this is massive. This is massive. And whether the Saints would have been here or not, in terms of, okay, we are in Irvine because there's stuff going on at the facility, right? That obviously is the reason that they are doing this, in the sense that they were talking about doing this long before this season. I think that you needed this, and I think that this team needs this. Right. So we'll find out. We're going to get a lot more information on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're going to be out here every day of camp. We're going to be out here every day of practice. Myself, Deuce McAllister, Mike Haas, and we'll get you those updates. I'm not going to do an episode of this pod after Wednesday's practice. I'm going to try to do one after Thursday's practice. There's a few reasons. One, the timeline, the schedule for Wednesday is going to get crazy. There's going to be a ton of coverage that I need to get done. And also, I just think I don't want to overreact to anything I see on Wednesday. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the final segment. In the second segment, I want to talk a little bit more about health. I want to talk about Ryan Ramczyk, and I want to talk about a wide receiver who just got paid. Then the final segment, I want to talk about what are the first three things I'm looking for. And that's going to be over the first 2 days of practices. And then we'll come back and ideally have some answers for those questions on Thursday. But I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. We are out in Irvine. I'm sitting in the hotel room that I'm going to be imprisoned in for the next 25 days. And we're gonna go from there. I do have to give credit to the guy at the front desk when I kind of meandered in at midnight last night, and he was looking at his computer and he says, "Oh, welcome for your 26 night stay." And I was like, we're here for Saints training camp, right? they're hanging out at Irvine, blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, oh, are you a player? And I laughed at him because I assumed he was joking. Dead serious. So I'd like to thank that guy for thinking that in his wildest dreams, maybe I'm an NFL player. Maybe I'm and then I thought about it, I was like, I could be a long snapper. Come on. Now I don't get me wrong, I can't long snap. That is not a skill that I possess. But if I walked into a room and said, hey, I'm a long snapper in the NFL. Let's put it this way. If I dressed up as a long snapper for Halloween, I think I could pull it off. That's all I'm saying. So shout out to the guy at the front desk at midnight. He probably had a long day. I had a long day. But we're going to be getting into this. We'll be right back. Want to get more into Ryan Ramczyk, what all was said on that subject today. Talk about my guy, Rashid Shaheed. And then the first 3 things I'm looking at Saints training camp in Irvine in 2024. Who dat? We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak here, coming at you solo, giving you the first set of updates, the first dispatch on Inside Black and Gold from Irvine, California, from 2024 Saints training camp. We heard from Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomis today, kind of getting you into the flow for what will be a very, very interesting training camp. For one thing, because there will be no fans there. We talked about that. It will be great weather. They will be kind of grinding these guys down because there will be no excuses for weather. You can't say, hey, these guys are going off with heat exhaustion. If that's the case, then there's a problem. So you need to kind of build that toughness through the work rather than the weather. Now, we did get some good injury news today relative to a few players that we haven't seen yet. And so one is Chase Young, right? As I mentioned in the first segment, only 3 players will be off the field entirely. So 4 players if you include Ryan Ramczyk. So that's tight end Juwan Johnson, that's linebacker Nephi Sewell, and that is defensive end Tano Pastor. These are all injuries that we know about. Juwan is coming back from knee surgery. Nephi has an ACL that he's working back from, and Tano tore his Achilles during an offseason workout. So those are not surprises, but that means that 2 players who have not been on the field yet, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Chase Young, will be on the field, and we will see them working in some capacity. It doesn't sound like we're going to be seeing a ton from Chase Young, but this is a big step getting on the field for the first time, ramping up into that process. And on that subject, here's what Mickey Loomis had to say about how they're going to kind of incorporate Chase.
Up to this point, has it gone as well as you were hoping?
It's been very positive, and I've been impressed with how hard he's worked to get his rehab done, how his attitude about being on this team and having a chip on his shoulder. I feel like, look, here's a player who feels like he has something to prove, and oftentimes when you're that high a draft pick, that's hard to recapture. And I feel like that's where he's at. And look, again, we're just starting training camp, so we'll get to evaluate. We'll get to evaluate him as a player and where he's at, and we're going to be cautious about. We're not going to rush him out there. We're going to be cautious about how we practice him and get him to the point where he's playing, but we've got a lot of time to do that.
All right, kind of moving on, we're going to talk about Ryan Ramczyk a little bit here. If you haven't been paying attention, last week the Saints made several PUP moves. They moved 5 players to the PUP list. We talked about it on Friday's episode. Ryan Ramczyk is among them, but he has been sent to the reserve PUP list, which means he is done for the year. Now, one thing that means is that the Saints opened up a roster spot, so they signed former UFL and Notre Dame and Jacksonville wide receiver Kevin Austin Jr. into that final spot. Going to be an intriguing guy to watch. Don't know a ton about him, but he did stand out for the Birmingham Stallions last year in the UFL. He's a guy that has kind of latched onto NFL rosters before. He was in the same draft class as Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. He went undrafted, ended up on the Jaguars practice squad in that 2022 season. So he's just a guy. He's 6'2", big dude. Maybe he can find his way to work onto the Saints practice squad and go from there. Either way, it's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Ryan Ramczyk and Ryan Ramczyk's knee. And so, just like kind of going into it, here's what Mickey Loomis had to say on that subject.
Yeah, that's a rough one because my number one, look, Ryan Ramczyk's been a fabulous player for us, fabulous, and a great teammate. I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about is how often he went out there without being 100%, and just giving everything he's got. I know how badly he wants to play, and if there was any way possible, he would be playing. I just appreciate how much he's contributed to our team, and hopeful that things can turn around, and with a year off that as he responds and he can get back out here for us. I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, and it's frustrating, right? Like, I think when you kind of boil it down, it's disappointing in a lot of different ways that Ryan Ramczyk probably doesn't play football again. Now the Saints are going to kind of keep it close to the vest. They're going to keep all their options open. And I understand why. It just feels very unlikely that you get back a knee that's gone. Right. And, here's a bit of what Dennis Allen had to say today on that subject.
When did you all have a really solid grasp that you weren't going to have Ryan Ramczyk this season? And do you feel comfortable where you're at knowing that he's not going to be a part of it?
Well, look, I would say whenever you lose a player of the caliber of Ryan Ramczyk, that is a little bit of an unsettling feeling. And so, I think that hurts, not having a player of his caliber. I do think that we have some guys that I think are capable of stepping in and filling in that position. And some young guys that I think can step up and potentially fill that spot. So I'm excited about some of the youth that we have on the offensive line. I would say probably sometime through the course of middle of the off season, I think we began to realize that it's not responding the way that we wanted it to, and yet there was nobody that was willing to, kind of make any concrete statements as to whether or not he was going to be ready to play or not. I think we just wanted to give it time to see what happened, and so it was probably a week or two ago that I think we realized it's just not going to be ready to go.
And was it advantageous to just kind of get it out of the way early, knowing that he's not going to be here, and just settle it early rather than drag it out to the beginning of the season?
I think we got to a point where it was pretty obvious, in terms of his mindset, being able to play, and I think once the player comes to the realization that I don't think I'm going to be ready, then I think it just made sense for us to go ahead and make the move then, and then it opened up some roster spots so we can have a little bit more flexibility and some things that we could do in other areas.
Dennis, just to clarify, I think you knew around the time of owners' meetings that at that time it hadn't been responding early. So he had a surgery in like January-ish, and he
I think
surgery
the initial response after the surgery, we felt pretty good about that. Because I think I talked to you guys at the combine, and I was feeling pretty good about that. And then, probably a couple weeks after that, it just didn't take the turn that we were hoping that it would. And so, and then I think from that point on, it was just like, let's give it time, let's see what happens. And, it just didn't respond in a way that he or we would want it to.
You're checking the knee, you're not responding. Can you give me more clarity on that? Is that like a pain issue or a structural issue?
Well, you're probably asking the wrong person, because I'm not a doctor, so I don't really know that. I know that we felt like there was a couple of procedures a couple of ways that we could have gone about this. One was a little bit more cautiously optimistic. Which would give us, what we felt like still was a good chance. One was a lot more, either yes or no, meaning, you do the procedure. If it responds right, then he'll be good. If you don't, he's done. So I think the course of action that we took was a little bit more, cautiously optimistic, thinking that might be able to put us over the hump.
So is he gonna have that second one now, or second option?
That's nothing that's been discussed with us. I think right now he's in Wisconsin, going through some rehab, and we're just leaving all open, options open for the future.
When you have talked to him, how is he taking this?
It's probably a better question for him in terms of exactly, how he's feeling. I mean, obviously, I can sense some, obviously some disappointment. But overall, I mean, I think he's, at peace with where he's at right now.
What do you mean by at peace, like in terms of?
Not playing this season.
Yeah, but what about but still working towards maybe playing again at some
Yeah,
point?
I think we're going to leave all options open, I mean, I don't think anything past this season is off the table.
Yeah, and so you go from there. You got to figure it out. But it's just tough. And talk to Scott Shanley on Sports Talk on Friday. The clips don't exist because we've been having issues at the studio. So if you didn't listen to it live, it doesn't exist. But one thing we talked about with Ryan in particular is when you look at Ryan Ramczyk's career and Ryan Ramczyk's impact on the Saints, what sets his career apart from so many players is not just that he was an impactful player, not just that he was at the top of his position for however long. It's that he stepped in on day one. And, obviously he wasn't at his peak, but he was close enough to it that you never felt like he was the weak link on an offensive line. From his rookie season debut on, even in that rookie season, he played left tackle. He held up, right? Like what Scott mentioned, it's like you look at that team and you're like, oh yeah, Teron Armstead's on the left side. We're going to send everything at this rookie on the right side and we're going to beat him. You couldn't beat him. Like that was what was magical about Ryan Ramczyk's career is he started at such a high level and maintained it and really never fell off, right? Like if Ryan Ramczyk never plays another game, you're going to look at his career and say the baseline was so high that I mean, I don't know if you can find another example of a player that started high, really never wavered that much, never fell off, and then just ended his career, like never had a down season even that wasn't just an injury or two holding him back. Like last year was probably his worst season, and it was in large part because that knee was letting him down. So we'll go from there. Either way, Ryan Ramczyk, I think, deserves a lot of credit for that. And we'll find out. Maybe something crazy happens like Mickey and Dennis were talking about. You're keeping your options open. You're going to figure it out. But sure doesn't seem to me like he'll be coming back. One guy who is going to be coming back for at least one more season, and I am thrilled about it, is Rashid Shaheed. He agreed to an extension over the weekend, a 1-year extension, $5.2 million. And it's an interesting number. It's an interesting decision because the Saints, they didn't have to do it. He's going to be a restricted free agent at the end of this season. They signed him on the exclusive rights tender for about $1 million, just shy of $1 million this season, which you look at the numbers he put up, 46 catches, 719 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was as elite of a deep threat as you'll find in the NFL in that season. And you want him going forward. You don't want anyone to be able to negotiate with him. You want to figure it out. Now, the question that I saw posed was, is $5.2 million an overpay for a UDFA wide receiver who's never had more than 50 catches in a season? It's a good question. Now, I asked Dennis Allen if the contract is kind of reflective of the expectations for what the Saints believe Shaheed will do this season and beyond. This is what he had to say.
Rashid got an extension last week. Is that just reflective of kind of the expectations going into year 3 for you?
Yeah, look, I think it's kind of a win-win for him and for us. You know, we get to kind of lock a good young player up for a couple of years and feel good about, you know, where that puts us from a financial standpoint. It gives him a little bit of security too. And so, I think that just says that we have some positive feelings, towards him, and feel like he's got, a bright future.
All right, and kind of going further on that, I asked Mickey Loomis about, okay, why would you do this now? And this is what he had to say.
Yeah, I think he was in a little bit of an unusual situation that he was an exclusive rights player that didn't have a contract. So, oftentimes, look, he wants to get paid based upon what he thinks he's going to be, and we want to pay him based upon what he's been and where we think he's going to be. And sometimes that's hard to marry. And so, oftentimes, you get in a position where maybe there's a bridge deal that gets rewards the player for what he's done, and yet gives him time to achieve what we think he can achieve, and then get another deal. And so that's really what this deal is.
All right, and so you kind of hear they're kind of saying the same thing, right? You're talking about a win-win. You're talking about the player wants that security. So you look at it from Rashid's perspective. You probably believe that, hey, okay, you're going into the next season and you're probably going to get a second round tender or a first round tender. If that was this year, the first round tender price was about $4.9 million. The first round tender, I believe, was 6 point something million. So you're kind of splitting the difference, right? And so if you believe you're going to get that, great. What if you go out and tear your ACL? What happens then? You get nothing. So I think for a player going into a season where you really feel like you can play yourself into a big time contract, this is an insurance policy. It's also an insurance policy for the Saints when you consider how much might you have to pay down the road. And if he really does blow up this season, goes for 1,000 yards, especially with returns as much bigger part of the equation now, do teams start to, do you end up having to give him that first round tender? Because if you put him on a second round tender, teams are going to come in and try to negotiate with him. And then you'll be in a situation where you might lose him for an amount that you were unwilling to pay. Now, the question becomes $5.2 million. Is that too much for a player of Rashid's caliber, at least in terms of what he has done? So let's take a look at some other receivers making a similar amount. Patriots, Kendrick Bourne, $6.5 million. Baltimore, Ravens, Rashad Bateman, $6.4 million. So this is the 44th highest paid receiver, right? Darius Slayton, $6 million average per year with the Giants, $45 million. So I'm going to skip any guys on rookie deals. Olave's in that range. Josh Reynolds, $4.5 million. Right, Devin Duvernay, $4.2 million. Curtis Samuel, $8 million. Adam Thielen, $8.3 million. Juju Smith-Schuster, $8.5 million. Jacoby Myers, $11 million per season. Robert Woods, $7.6 million. Jawan Jennings, $7.6 season. Marquise Brown, $7 million. Right, so you kind of look at this list, and is that not the territory that you think Rashid Shaheed should be in, right? Let's look. So Kendrick Bourne, who is going to be making $6.5 million per season, what did he do in the 2023 season? 37 catches, 406 yards. The 2022 season, 37 catches, 406 yards, 4 touchdowns. The 2022 season, 35 catches, 434 yards, 1 touchdown. Khalif Raymond, $5.2 million. What did he do last year for the Lions? 35 catches, 489 yards, and a touchdown. Now you might be saying, hey, Khalif Raymond is an elite return guy. Yeah, exactly. So I think that contract is exactly where it should be for Rashid Shaheed. And I think the Saints are going to be thrilled that they'll be able to keep him around for another year, and we will go from there. But hey, congrats to Rashid, right? Nicer guy in the world I'm not sure you could find. Earn that contract, is going to play up to that contract and beyond, in my opinion. Like, he's that good. And you're looking at a UDFA who is a success story. So do not complain about that contract. Just be happy that you're going to keep this duo of Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed in-house, because I think they're very much getting slept on. And this time next year, we're going to be having a very different conversation about the Saints wide receiver room. But I digress. That's it for this segment. This is Inside Black and Gold. We're going in on Irvine, California, Saints Training Camp 2024. Sitting in a hotel room, finishing out this episode of Inside Black and Gold. One more segment to go. We're going to look at my top 3 things I'm looking for the first 2 days of Saints Training Camp. Who dat? Subscribe. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak here. One more segment to go. We are breaking down Saints 2024 training camp. Kicks off Wednesday morning with the first practice at the campus of UC Irvine in Orange County, California. I have not been sweating. I dig it. It's not going to rain. Perfect. So let's talk about the first 3 things that I'm looking for in the first 2 days of camp. As I explained earlier in the podcast, I'm not going to be posting an episode after Wednesday's practice. I'm going to be posting an episode after Thursday's practice. And one of the reasons is the first item on my list here that I'm looking for. And the question is, what are the rotations? Now, when we talk about roster battles, you can't really look at a roster battle and say, well, this guy won it on day 1. This guy's ahead on day 1, because a true roster battle, you will see one player taking reps with the ones, say Wednesday, and then you will look at the next day and you'll say, okay, he's now with the 2s and someone else is up with the 1s. That's what we saw with Alante Taylor and Paulson Adebo. That's what we probably will see with Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler, right? Any roster battle where it is truly even, you're going to even out the reps. So that's just something that we're not going to really get a good picture of until day 2. Now, if we look at it and you see Jake Haener go out there and take first team reps 2 days in a row, then that tells you something, right? There's only a few positions that I think there's a legit roster battle at. Now, one of the roster battles that I think is going to develop that hasn't yet, left guard, I would not be surprised to see Nick Saldiveri cede some first team reps to a veteran as we go forward, just to see what those guys have, just to see how the group looks. And we'll go from there. Pass rush is also a question, right? Who gets first team reps? You know, and it's not necessarily first team, but who works in on first team reps behind Cam Jordan, behind Carl Granderson? Who gets that done? I need to see it. You need to go out 2 days of practice and kind of find out where those rotations are happening. And then we can start to grade out, okay, who's actually winning that position battle? Now, some of these can happen with the second and third team. It's a little harder to track. But it is important with the offensive line. So that's one that I always make sure to track, is who's getting the second team reps at offensive line, because the backups at those positions are vital, right? So who's getting the first team reps, or who's getting the second team reps behind Trevor Penning? Who's getting the second team reps behind Taliesin Fuanga, behind Cesar Ruiz, behind Eric McCoy, right? Guys like Lucas Patrick, Shane Lemieux, Oli Udoh, Landon Young. These are all key players, so we need to see where they are lining up. Another question, Jonathan Abram, Jordan Howden. How are you rotating there? We'll find out. The slot is another question. I don't think there's going to be a true roster battle there. I think you're going to see, for example, Alante Taylor getting all the first team reps, Khalid McKinstry getting all of the second team reps, and you're going to go for there. But that's going to be the first major thing that I take note of over these first couple days. Item 2. Jerry Maguire said, show me the money. I say, show me the speed. Yes, this offense, in my opinion, is only going to work if you lean into the athleticism and speed of the players involved. I want to see Rashid Shaheed, who we talked about extensively. I want to see him get the ball in space with room to run. Chris Olave, I want to see him get the ball in space with room to run. Alvin Kamara, do you sense a trend? I want to get him the ball in space with room to run. I want to stretch the defense to the edge of the field and see how they handle it. I want the Saints defense to be run ragged in these practices. We'll worry about the defense when the season gets here. Right now, I am more interested in seeing this offense win, and I need them to win in ways that take advantage of the athleticism, that gets Trevor Penning and Taliesin Fuanga and Nick Saldiveri and Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy out in space, all 5 premier athletes at their positions, right? It's been a while since you've seen the Saints have truly elite athleticism on offensive line, right? You know, we talked about Ryan Ramczyk. He was always at such a high level. I would never accuse him of being the most athletic tackle in the world, right? So you got to figure it out that way. But now you do have all these athletic guys. Like for Trevor Penning, you know, for all of his faults and the struggles he's had, it hasn't been an athleticism problem. It's been a between the ears problem. So can you take that load off? Can you get him in space? Can you get the defense moving from side to side, create those running lanes, and let Alvin Kamara break some long runs that you have not been able to see, right? Kendre Miller, same thing. I want to see the offense beating the defense. Now, it's tough. Usually in camp, the defense will start a little ahead of the offense because there's position that needs to happen. But I think the defense is going to be actually having a hard time keeping up with the offense and kind of learning in real time how they operate. So for me to be happy after the first 2 days of practice, I need to see the defense get torched a little bit. Because I don't know how far this team can go if the offense doesn't do what it's advertised to do. And I'd like to see that happen early before the defense can necessarily figure it out. Right? Like what happens when you do have that advantage? And I think the defense will only get better as they go and they get more used to seeing this new offense under Clint Kubiak. But use that speed, take advantage of it. I want to see it early. I want to see it often. I want to see it ingrained into this offense because that's what has driven me nuts over the last 2 seasons with Pete Carmichael is you got this guy in Chris Olave who you get him in space and no one's touching him. You never get him in space. Rashid Shaheed, he only gets the ball 40 yards down the field. Throw a screen, do something. You can get it done. I promise. Either way, that's number 2. And then finally, we're going to be talking about it. Who is ahead in the QB2 race? Like like I mentioned, you're going to see a rotation, I imagine, but who's winning those reps? Who is really kind of putting their stamp on that backup quarterback position? And I think to me right now, I'd put Jake ahead. I think this team, if they're being honest with themselves, would rather just keep 2 quarterbacks. But in order to do that, Spencer Rattler's going to have to prove that he can walk in and play on day one, that he can get into the game if Derek leaves with an injury and go win it. Right. So he's going to have to look poised. He's going to have to look comfortable. He's going to have to look like he understands the offense. He's going to have to look like he has improved and picked up on things that he may have been slow at in rookie minicamp, in OTAs, in minicamp. To his credit, it seems like he's done that. So it seems like he's done that so far. So we'll have to continue to see how that goes. But it's going to be what I look at to kind of get a baseline of, okay, can he potentially be the backup quarterback? We're not going to get real answers until we get into the preseason games, but we can get started, and this is where it's going to be. This is where you're going to start to really form those opinions of, okay, this kid could be something versus he was a 5th-round pick for a reason. But all right, that's going to be it. I'm going to wrap up this episode of Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Going to be out in Irvine for about 25 more days after this. We're also going to head out to Arizona for a weekend. Then we're going to go to San Francisco for a weekend before heading back to New Orleans. So I'm going to start scouting for a more picturesque area where I might be able to record some of these podcasts going forward. We're going to try to get Steve on for the pod later in the week. Obviously, the time difference and scheduling, trying to navigate around practices, which are all in the morning, and kind of crossing over when we would typically record makes things difficult, but we're going to do our best. I'm also going to get content from Mike Haas, Deuce McAllister, who are out here with us, and hopefully I can catch up with a few of the reporters, a few of the other people who are out here at camp. Obviously, we're going to have one-on-one interviews with players. We're going to get guys at the podium. Tentatively on Wednesday, we're going to talk to Alvin Kamara, so that'll obviously be a huge storyline. I doubt that he's going to dive in very much into his contract, but hey, we'll see. Body language says a lot with Alvin, and we'll find out what that is. But until then, Who dat? Go Saints. Thanks everybody for listening. Be easy, y'all. Peace.